Hello. Now, I apologize for going live early, about an hour early or so, almost. Unavoidable circumstances. Little Viking had a full day today, and he went down early, which is unusual for him. So I thought I'd take the opportunity, since there's always a lot of stuff to do on a farm of this size, and no matter what you do, you always have stuff left to do. But let me know if this thing rubs on the zip. I forgot to put on something that doesn't bother the microphone. So if it's causing an issue, just let me know and I'll try and lean forward or take the top off or something. Anyway, there's 4 of you here. Hello Chad, hello Gabriel. And the topic for today was going to be the indefectibility of the church. Now, the reason I picked that topic is because it is one of the most confused and confusing for many people, including nominal Catholics, and including even some sedevacantists. And they don't really understand how the church is still indefectible if there's no one in the Vatican that's actually, an actual cleric of the Catholic Church, and so on. Gabriel said new lighting. No, it's not new. I just switched some on, and I've got a piece of my world map still has to go up, and that's some of the backing, so it tends to reflect some of the light. I'm kind of surrounded by various bits and pieces, files. You can probably see in the background. It's just, we're still unpacking. Those of you that have moved before know that process can take months and months. The mic is really popping against the zipper. Okay, I tell you what, let's see if I can take it off. There we go. Oh, no. Okay, how's that? Better? And thanks for responding to that. Appreciate it. Okay, so hopefully no zipper. And yeah, so the point about indefectibility is that, as the previous screen that I had on was showing, which let's see if I'm not sure if I can show you that now or not. Let's see. I think there's a way that I can show you that screen. There you go. If I just move out the way. Let me go off to this side. There you go. For if this endeavor of this activity is of human origin, it will destroy itself. But if the church comes from God, you will not be able to destroy them. And that is in Acts 5:38 to 39. So that, to a certain extent, explains the position of the Catholic Church, which is, that essentially the church will always be there and will not be destroyed by human activity. Now, some of you looking at this are saying, how the hell can you say that when the Vatican is filled with pedophiles? There's really any kind of clergy left in the Vatican, and so on. And here we go. I'm going to explain how that all works, although there's only 8 of you. And again, I apologize for coming on early, but it is the way it is. And those of you that come on later can always catch up later. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to read the relevant passage from my book. There you go, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. And this is just to give you a taste, of... there's a lot of other details, like the visibility of the Pope, specifically the visibility of the Church, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, this is probably the most complicated part of sedevacantism, if you like, and a lot of people keep trying to lie about it, pretend it isn't the way it is, and blah blah blah. So I thought, no, let me just nip it in the bud. So I'm afraid it's not going to be very exciting. You're going to essentially listen to me read myself for a few minutes because it goes on for a couple of pages. And this is for those of you that do have the book. It's on page 311. It's chapter 6.3.5, and it's titled, "If all the offices are empty, then the church has defected." That is one of the objections. Chapter 6 covers the objectors and the objections. So, without further ado, then this next point, in other words, the defectibility of the church, is perhaps the most complicated to explain because it relies on dogmatic principles of canon law that are little understood or even known about by even most observant Catholics, and in addition are in some cases the result of a negative proof in Roman law instead of a positive proof. What I mean by that is that in Roman law, if a rule says if X then Y, while it usually means also that if not X then not Y, this is not necessarily always the case. With respect to the validity of the various offices, powers of the Cardinals to vote in a new pope, and various other duties of various branches of the bureaucratic machine of the Vatican, many assume that a lack of valid cardinals, valid clerics in most or even all of the offices of the Vatican, and so on, means that the whole structure has collapsed and it is just Freemasons all the way down, and the church no longer exists. Once again, the usual enemy is conflation of concepts, ignorance of the details, and ignorance of Catholic dogma. So, as I hope you're starting to get used to doing yourself, let's break this down again. The first point to understand is one of negative proof with respect to the validity of any bishop as an actual bishop of the Catholic Church. The impostors and deceivers, as well as some genuine but very ignorant would-be Catholics, will say that only the Pope can validly elect bishops and make them bishops. And as there has not been a valid Pope since the 9th of October 1958, there really aren't any valid bishops left, as any would probably all be dead, or if there are any remaining, they would be in their 90s and soon depart from this world. There's also a footnote there, which I'll read. The footnote says, according to canon law of 1917, a priest needs to be at least 30 years old before he can be made bishop. So as of 2020, a bishop ordained, say, on the 8th of October 1958 and approved by Pope Pius XII just before he died, the next day would be 92 years old today. So their argument is, well, you probably don't have any valid bishops left, so the church has defected because there are no valid bishops. Let me continue. Well, people who subscribe to that theory are either intentionally lying, definitely the case of the learned impostors, or simply in ignorant error, the case of most supposedly nominal Catholics who are still fooled into belief in the Novus Ordo Church, inverted commas. Allow me to explain the process of the creation of a new bishop. In the first instance, all that is required for a bishop to be made is that a valid priest who has been deemed suitable for the role and who willingly accepts it is made bishop by the simple process of going through the formalities and ritual required, which includes the physical attendance of at least one other bishop, but preferably 3 if possible. The process is a ritual where the laying on of hands by the bishop passes on the charism of the apostolic succession that has been passed on since the time of the apostles. This passing on of the charism is the reason why the Catholic Church claims apostolic succession. Once it has been passed on, the newly ordained bishop is also linked to the unbroken chain that started with the apostles. Again, there's another footnote there to explain what charism is. Charism is defined as a special spiritual gift or power divinely conferred by the grace of God. Continuing, it is true that only the Pope has the authority to state who is permitted to be a bishop. However, throughout church history, this has always been assumed as valid. It is obvious because, particularly in ancient times, often a bishop would be ordained and not only never meet the Pope, but never even have any communication with him beyond those of general church dispensation that would have reached his diocese. It is a fact that even after ordination, a pope has the right to claim the ordination was invalid and thus dismiss the would-be bishop. However, in practice, this has only very rarely been done, and for the most part, even in more modern times, the Pope has not been required to positively approve every ordained bishop before they're considered valid. In other words, the validity of an ordained bishop is always simply assumed and valid, and only invalidated by an express statement by the Pope to that effect. So that clears that up. And I want to interject one little point. Part of Roman law is what in Italian is called silenzio assenso, which means silence equates to approval. It equates to assent, which is, yeah, you're okaying it. So unless the Pope specifically states that a bishop that has been made a bishop is not valid, that bishop has always, throughout church history, been assumed as valid. This is important, and we'll see why shortly. Now to the next point, which is the ability of bishops to ordain new bishops during an interregnum. An interregnum is between popes, when a valid or living pope does not sit on the papal throne. Historically, because there have been various anti-popes and at times up to 3 competing popes at once, there is again a long historical and valid tradition during which new bishops were indeed ordained, either due to emergency or in good faith, yet while a pope was actually not present. This happened either because the pope had died and a new one had yet to be elected, but out in the provinces the news may not have yet reached, and as a result a new bishop was ordained while there was no living pope present, or, and more frequently in all probability, a new bishop was ordained while an active anti-pope occupied the Holy See. In such cases, once the legitimate new pope eventually reclaimed his throne, he did in fact usually dismiss all those bishops that had been ordained under the rule of the anti-pope that preceded him. In fact, as per Cum ex apostolato officio, a papal encyclical that is particularly relevant in this, and hence by dogmatic canon law, because a papal encyclical is, forever pretty much, every act made by an anti-pope is retroactively deemed invalid. So this would be the case anyway, unless the new pope deemed the specific bishop, although ordained under the rule of an anti-pope, was nevertheless acceptable. This acceptance, however, need not be positively stated by the new pope, because, unless he specifically deems it invalid, as with all other ordinations of bishops, it is simply assumed. In other words, if you've been made a bishop, that's it, you're assumed to be a valid bishop, unless the pope or new pope or whichever valid pope says, no, you're not a bishop, don't like your face, you're not it. And again, this has happened many, many times, especially in the 14th, 15th, 16th century. There was a bunch of popes, fake popes, anti-popes, 2 or 3 popes at the same time, that made their bishops, their nephews, their particular, family and friends, cardinals, bishops, priests, whatever. And when eventually the other pope, the legitimate pope, was deemed to be the legitimate pope, they almost invariably got rid of pretty much everyone that the anti-pope had listed as valid bishops and so on. And the reason they did that, of course, was also political and whatever. But that is how it works. Now, keep in mind that although an anti-pope sat on the throne, the ordination of the new bishop was in all probability properly carried out by valid bishops, and so potentially entirely as valid as any other ordination of a bishop. So just because there was an anti-pope reigning when a bishop was made a bishop, he would have been made a bishop by valid bishops that were, valid bishops under the previous pope before he died. Now, we've got a different situation because the interregnum has been so long, and we'll get to that. But, just because a guy was made bishop when there was no pope present, doesn't mean that those bishops are not valid. And again, it's up to the new pope, new valid pope, to decide who is allowed to be a bishop or not. It is at such a time that a new legitimate and valid pope may, however, determine that the ordination was in fact invalid, and is at his and only his discretion to do. Why would a pope deem some ordinations invalid and others leave alone or not comment on, and thus tacitly accept or even positively confirm? Precisely to prevent infiltration. When and if a new pope proclaims the currently usurped Holy See, he shall have the absolute right to dismiss all the fake bishops and fake clerics of the Novus Ordo, with possibly rare exception based on his judgment of the honest intent of some individuals. But even this is unlikely, for the ordination of such Novus Ordo clerics would be suspect from the start if done by invalid clerics to begin with. In effect, for clarity, the only bishops and priests a new pope could assume to be valid are those that continued the holy tradition of the Church faithfully, including ordinations during the longest interregnum in the history of the Church. So that's applying to us now. Because most of the bishops that exist now, most of the cardinals that exist now, have been made bishops and so on by invalid clerics, heretics, that fall under Canon 188, Part 4, all of those guys are essentially invalid. And if there was a new pope that appeared tomorrow, he would basically have to state that. As explained above, these ordinations can be assumed to be valid in principle, and when a new pope arrives can then be confirmed in fact, if required, or simply continue to be positively assumed, as has always been done in most of the past cases for the entire history of the Church. All of the above has been to explain that the priests and bishops who have continued the true and holy ways of the Catholic Church remain, by positive assumption, unless later overturned by a valid pope, valid and true. In other words, all the sedevacantist priests and bishops are valid and remain valid and are assumed to be valid. In other words, the only valid priests and bishops remaining in the Catholic Church today are those that absolutely reject all things Vatican II, including all the anti-popes related to it and all the falsely ordained clergy of the Novus Ordo, since these impostors were ordained by false clerics themselves, as previously shown in Chapter 5. Any cleric not rejecting the anti-popes and the heresy of Vatican II and instead treating one or both as valid, in turn also falls under the provision of Canon 188, Part 4, and as such is no longer a valid cleric of the Catholic Church. But now we come to the crux of the matter concerning the empty offices in the Vatican. The argument of the impostors goes something like this. 1. Only the cardinals can elect a new pope. 2. There are no valid cardinals left. 3. Therefore, a new pope can't be elected ever again anyway. We deal with this specific point in section 6.3.8. So 4, the Church has defected because A, we have no longer a valid Holy See of Rome as such, and we can never have one again, and we are told that the Holy See will continue until the end of time, but it clearly no longer exists, nor can it ever come to be again, so it means the Church is no longer supernaturally protected, which in turn means that either Jesus lied, or the Protestants, or the Eastern Orthodox, or the Buddhists, or the atheists, or maybe Ahura Mazda was true instead, and the Catholic Church was never special at all, nor the one true Holy and Apostolic Church Jesus ordained on earth. Now, we will go through each of these lies and errors in turn, but let us begin with the understanding that while some people genuinely have believed the above arguments as valid, this is because they are unconsciously under the impression that Roman law is the same as the general legal system everyone is most familiar with from television and even the actual courts in the entirety of the English-speaking world. In other words, a system of law that in essence tries to use rigid formula to regulate every situation, even unexpected ones. Roman law does not operate in that fashion at all. It states principles of law, and for unexpected situations, the logical and reasonable assumptions that can be made both as a result of the baseline principle as well as the specifics of the individual case being judged are taken to their natural conclusions. In order to go through the litany of errors listed above, it is necessary to first explain a little about the history of the Church and the procedure for papal elections. An article that well summarizes the pertinent points has been archived, and I give the link. The most relevant part is reproduced below for convenience, with emphasis added by myself. In the year 1059, Pope Nicholas II gave the cardinal bishops the sole right to elect a bishop of Rome, while the other cardinals were to give assent to the election. This was a way of ensuring that the Roman emperor and other kings would not be part of the election process and exercise undue influence. So once again, it was done to protect the Church from infiltration. During the Middle Ages, cardinals acquired enormous prestige within the Church and were ranked above bishops, even though some of them were not even ordained as priests. Please note, cardinals, who are the only ones who could elect the Pope, sometimes were not even priests. They were not even ordained clergy. In 1179, Pope Alexander III decreed that all three ranks of cardinals would participate in the election of the Bishop of Rome. Pope Alexander also created the first cardinal who didn't serve in Rome, but continued as bishop of his own diocese in Germany. Previously, all cardinals had to reside in Rome. Pope Alexander made this new cardinal the titular pastor of a church in Rome, and this tradition has continued with cardinals residing outside of Rome to this day. At one time, cardinals had significant authority over the titular churches, but today their role is one of encouragement and in some cases of financial support. In recent years, there have been significant changes in the College of Cardinals. In 1568, Pope Sixtus V had set the maximum number of cardinals at 70, representing the 70 elders of Moses. Now here comes an emphasized bit. But Pope John the 23rd, fake Pope John the 23rd, keep in mind this is somebody else writing, I would not call him Pope John the 23rd, I would call him Roncalli, which was his name, raised the number and the Pope, so Roncalli, fake Pope 23rd, raised the number of cardinals, and Pope Paul VI, Montini, set the new limit at 120. Paul VI also restricted the electors to those cardinals under the age of 80, a reform that was not greeted happily at the time by octogenarian members of the college. Pope John the 23rd also required that all cardinals, whatever their rank at the time of their creation, be bishops. This requirement is sometimes dispensed with at the request of the newly created cardinal, as is the case with the American cardinal Avery Dulles. We'll come back to this guy. Perhaps the most significant change has been the internationalization of the College of Cardinals. Until the time of Pope Pius XII, most cardinals served as bishops of the dioceses within Italy or in their curial offices of the Vatican. Today, only 17 of the 117 cardinals are Italians. This may mean that the election of an Italian pope is less likely than in past years. Up through the elections of Pope John Paul II, 2/3 plus 1 of the votes of the cardinals has been required for the election of a new pope. Pope John Paul II amended this. The new procedure requires 2/3 vote, but if after 14 ballots no one has been elected, a vote of the absolute majority of the electors will suffice for elections. And there finishes the quote of the article. I now comment. Notice how the Freemason Roncalli immediately raised the number of cardinals to 120 so he could stuff the ballot box with complete Freemasons, as we have seen in previous chapters. And Montini soon also made it so that the older cardinals, in other words, the ones most likely to be actual Catholics, like Ottaviani was, were excluded from the voting process for the election of a new pope. Not a coincidence, as I'm sure you appreciate. Nor was the special dispensations allowed to the American Jesuit Cardinal Avery Dulles, who was, of course, the nephew of Allen Dulles, the old director of the CIA. Allen Dulles was involved with some of the most truly evil people and events of recent world history, including various coups and the MK Ultra mind control experiments, the details of which are far beyond the scope of this book, but were indeed inhuman and of similar nature to various Nazi experiments done on people. Notice also the usual globalization of everything so that the cardinals today not only are Freemasons, but don't even have to pretend to be locally invested in the process of the Vatican. Finally, Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II, also reduced it to a common majority, the usual democratization popular with the Freemasons who excel at fermenting the masses into all sorts of idiotic, discivic, and even suicidal positions, as we can tell today. Now, based on the above, it is perhaps somewhat understandable that the average person only passingly familiar with mostly Anglo-Saxon law, which still originates from Roman law, as does pretty much every legal system in the West to one extent or other, but which has the notable differences stated, would think that this means that if those 70 or 120 or whatever the number of cardinals suddenly disappears or whatever the number of cardinals, if they all suddenly disappear in a tornado, then that's it, the church ends. But this is absurd and completely false on its face. First of all, the limitation of the election of the Pope and the limit on the number of cardinals, and indeed the actual position of cardinal itself, are not ecclesiastic or divine rules of dogmas. They were implemented for the normal running of the Catholic Church as it grew into the largest religion on earth. This is obvious from the fact that popes existed and were elected in the past without any of the above rules. In fact, Bishops were usually chosen originally by the Catholic community they lived in, and in ancient times some were chosen when they had not even been ordained as priests, yet required them to be ordained rapidly. They'd been chosen when they're not yet been ordained as priests yet, requiring them to be ordained rapidly just before ordination as bishops. Since in Catholic dogma and logic, and reason too, the future never invalidates the past, it is obvious that if popes were elected in the past by people who were not even bishops, nor specifically nominated by a group restricted to the parish they operated in, the Vatican, then should such a condition arise today, the same rules that applied in the past would remain valid. And that is one of the principles of Catholicism, of course. The past doesn't invalidate the future doesn't invalidate the past. And this is precisely the case we have now. Just as if a nuclear bomb had hit the Vatican in 1958, the fact that there are currently no valid bishops or cardinals in Rome is not cause for thinking the Church no longer exists or has defected. As long as some valid bishop and priests remain, they have the ability to vote in a new and valid pope, who can then retroactively assume the validity of all the electors as indeed valid bishops and valid cardinals, if so required. Or again, it can simply be assumed by the new pope without requiring a specific positive declaration, as has always happened in the past, though admittedly a positive declaration in such a case would be very wise and welcome. Sometimes the argument is used that if the Holy See in Rome is totally devoid of any valid clerics, then that is a demonstration that the Church has defected. The claim is based on the lie that the Holy See must be physically in Rome. We know this is absolute nonsense because the entirety of the Holy See was not in Rome at all from 1309 to 1376, during which time the entire papacy and 7 succeeding popes all resided in Avignon. And there is a little footnote there, which I'll read. The deceiver J. Dyer, on which more in section 6.4, is one who tries to use this reasoning, an approach he quickly abandons when the Avignon papacies are brought up by people who actually know a bit of church history. In conclusion then, if the ancient Catholic Church elected popes for 1,000 years and more in relatively simple fashion and without the need to even limit the number of electors to specific cardinals or specific number, and if, as demonstrated, the additional practices were brought in to deal with the practicalities of an ever-expanding organization, then there is no reason at all why when an unexpected attack on the Church results in wiping out many of these positions, it would not simply return to what has always happened before. And there's another footnote there, which I'll read now. It is also important to note that these additional procedures, such as the limiting of the vote to 70 cardinals and so on, were practical steps taken to protect the Church from infiltrators and influence by men of means and power, as alluded to already, and not unchangeable Catholic dogma based in divine law. It is also important to point out that such valid electors would really best be people intimately involved with the Church, such as has always been the case in the past, which is why they usually were members of the Diocese of the Vatican. The situation is different today in the event of a new valid pope being finally elected, because if such a hypothetical situation, which we will touch on in section 6.3.8 and later in chapter 8, it would be very likely that the electors would be the bishops that have continued to remain Catholic throughout the last 62 years of impostor antipopes. These bishops are truly scattered around the globe, yet remain the only faithful bishops, so a conclave would have to be called at whatever convenient place on earth would suit the largest number of them or be practical. Though, for various reasons, mostly of tradition and general pacification of would-be deniers, it would certainly be best if that location was indeed the Vatican in Rome, after a long overdue cleansing and deep reconsecration of every building and stone in it. And that concludes the reason why the Church has not defected. So the objections to the defection of the Church, in essence, are: you have no more valid bishops. That's a lie. Oh, the Holy See has to have all its offices filled. It's a lie. Oh, the Holy See has to be in Rome. It's a lie. And hopefully you can see the pattern. So that is where we are. Now I'm going to quickly look at some comments. Mostly it's just you guys saying hello, but let me just quickly go over it. Okay. Daniel says, Woolly Ram, you're late. 20 push-ups. Done. Very good, Woolly. Yes, of course, that's why they disallowed the vote to the octogenarians. Jean Dortal says, Kurgan, have you read Wim Hof's book on John Courtney Murray? No, I have no idea who any of those people are. David Perkins says, that's not how the debate played out. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I don't know. David, if you can clarify what you're talking about, let us know. Okay, and that's 22 of you, which I'm pretty impressed considering I'm an hour early and it was, just me reading some passages. But yeah, any comments or question or clarifications on what I've said about the indefectibility of the church, let me know. Otherwise, that's kind of it. I was going to do a stream on roasting Protestants just because they're so moronic. We've had this like long thread of stuff on Social Galactic, and it's just basically the Protestants are arguing that reason is not required to be a Christian. So it's quite something. Oh, Luvin Haggis says, how would the genuine bishops go about overthrowing the impostors in the Vatican? That is also one of the questions that was asked. I have mentioned this before. I've actually done a video on it. I don't remember what number it is, but it's something like Why Catholic or Get the Fuck Out or one of those. But in essence, these are Freemasonic satanic scum. So they're not just going to go, oh, well, we got voted out. Same like, Biden and all those guys. Do you think voting is going to get them out? No. The only way that they're going to be got out is by force. The only way that that's going to happen is with a sufficient number of people that wake up from the slumber of churchianity and actually become Catholics. Which is why I do what I do, which is why I wrote the books that I wrote, which is, why the community of sedevacantism continues to grow. And, people that become sedevacantists tend to be full-on zealots. Why? Because the truth matters. And who is unwilling to be a zealot for the truth? Liars, cowards, deceivers. If you're a Catholic, you reject all those people, therefore, it's kind of right there. So yeah, it's not going to happen tomorrow. I think there's somebody. I've got like a little Telegram group now. So if you don't know about that, there is a Telegram group called Kurgan. I forget what it's called. Let me just have a look and see. Just if I remember the full name. It's if you're on Telegram, you go to http / whatever t.me, and then it's called The Kurgan View with a capital T for the, capital K for Kurgan, and capital V for view. So if you're on Telegram, look for The Kurgan View and join on there. And it was one of the questions was like, well, how do we take it back, sort of thing. It's going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to take a sufficient number of people to become full-on sedevacantists, because as I said, the truth matters. So why would you not be a zealot for the truth? And LS16 has joined us. Oh, Jean Dortal says that he hasn't read the book, but apparently goes into detail about CIA manipulation or Vatican II. I go into that in the book, right? So if you want to know what happened in Vatican II, who the enemies were, that's it. It's all in there. Look, that's why, that just covered indefectibility. I literally cover every objection in this book. I cover all the heresy of every document in the Vatican II documents. Well, when I say that, I cover every document of Vatican II, and I cover some of the heresy in every document. Whatever, to cover every heresy in every document would probably take about 2 books of this size to go through it in detail. I've just taken a couple of examples per document that are direct heresy. There's a lot more in there than just those examples I give, but they're sort of the best, easiest examples. So I cover that. I cover all the objections to sedevacantism that you've ever heard. They're all in there. There isn't there's only a limited number of objections to sedevacantism, and there I cover all of them. Then I cover the modus operandi of the objectors, of the people who deny sedevacantism. And then I cover some of the objectors, like J. Dyer and Barnhart. There are different types of objectors, the different type of, imposters, liars, fools, and, fooled innocents. So it's important to understand the difference of these things. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's the enough history of the church to make you understand what happened and so on. And Daniel says that Protestants drain his energy. Indeed, it's almost pointless arguing with them. They're like brain damaged children, essentially. Yes, Wooly Ram says it's an item in the oath against modernism that reason can lead us to knowing God. I actually know one of the zealots that forms part of my little community. I don't want to say too much about him, but he actually came to the conclusion that Catholicism is true purely by logic. He's slightly autistic, and by raw logic, he just went through all the steps, and he's like, well, this works. So yeah, absolutely. Gendertal said it's called John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition. It sounds quite interesting. Yeah, not to me. It's absolutely clear to me what happened in Vatican II. The process that led to it is over a couple of 100 years old. The Freemasons have been trying to infiltrate the church for over 200 years, and eventually succeeded quite well. So, it's all laid out. There's the document of the Alta Vendita of the Carbonieri from the 1800s very clearly spell out their intent to infiltrate the church to eventually get a fake pope. It literally is all mapped out, and these documents have been known about for centuries by those who look into this stuff. And yes, Daniel says being called a zealot should be a compliment. Absolutely. Why would you not be a fanatic for the truth? Again. And Tom says two basic options if you reject the principle of epikeia. Option A, the church has essentially legislated ourselves out of existence. We can't consecrate new bishops without a pope. Or B, the church has defected. We can recognize and resist as a heretical pope. Jesus is a liar under either scenario, therefore they must be dismissed. No, they're absolute nonsense. It's complete rubbish. Recognize and resist is complete idiocy. It's just another form of gatekeeping heretics. Society of SSPX and of SSPV, they're not Catholics. So. I promised to read your book after I finish Bitter Harvest. Okay, I have no idea what Bitter Harvest is, but great. Enjoy yourself, Daniel. Jean Dortal says, I will get your book. Okay, thanks. Hey guys, I'm not telling you this to try and sell you the book, okay? I don't care. I don't make my living from my books. But it is there. This is the sample copy I had, a test copy. It is there. I don't know if you can see with the reflection of the lights, but it is there to save you time. I spent years reading about this stuff to figure it out. And this has got all the references. So it's there for you to be able to check my work. You think I'm talking rubbish? You think that what I'm saying there is not true or not factual or not accurate? Have at it. Good luck. So far, no one has been able to invalidate it. A couple of people have picked up, some grammar error or some minor issue, which has been corrected as the editions get updated. But in essence, I'm pretty, busy, so I tend to not necessarily update every little tiny detail. I'd love to if I had a chance, but they're professionally edited. Most of the things have been picked up. There isn't like any glaring errors. I think the biggest criticism I've had of this book is that I have long run-on sentences, and yes, I do. And guess what? People from the 1700s, the 1800s, and even the early 1900s would all be comfortable with that. You know why? Because they had a vocabulary that was about 3 times what yours is today, the average person. And they could read huge run-on sentences while keeping their train of thought. I've never found that particularly difficult, so I just do it that way. But if you guys struggle with that, I'm sorry. Take your time. Look at where the commas are. Take a breath. I don't know. For me, it's pretty normal. So, but those are essentially the criticisms I've had. There hasn't been any constructive criticism that invalidates any of the points I've made, any of the objections I've made, any of the responses to the objections that I've made. So that's why I wrote it. Woolly Ram says, how many zealots as a percentage of nominal Catholic population would be needed to tip the balance? 5%? No. As far as I can tell, according to everything that I've read into the matter, it's about 1%. And the reason that it's about 1% is called Morphic Resonance. It's a principle that seems to apply in nature, that you need about 1% of, in lasers, you basically bounce light back and forth until it affects a certain number of electrons to bounce at a particular frequency where they eject, some energy which comes out in the form of light. Once it's about 1% of those electrons all resonate at the same thing, they all spontaneously turn. There's a book originally called The Hundredth Monkey, where they found that pilots in the Second World War were dropping these like sweet potatoes or whatever from their planes. They were just dropping these potatoes that were covered in oil because they'd been sitting in the cargo plane for too long and whatever. They'd like rolled out of the bags or whatever. So they just dropped them onto these like islands in the Pacific, and the monkeys wouldn't eat them because they were covered in oil, grease, and that sort of stuff. But then somebody noticed, some naturalist, I don't know, I haven't read the book. I just got a summary of it from some other book I read. Basically, one of the monkeys started to like take the sweet potato, took it into the sea and washed it, and then started eating it. And then some of the other monkeys saw this, and they started doing it too. So pretty shortly, on this one island, all the monkeys started to eat these sweet potatoes. But the interesting thing is that very shortly after that happened, all the monkeys on all the other islands spontaneously started doing the same thing. Now, Rupert Sheldrake, in his book A New Science of Life, first mentioned morphic resonance, and he was told, the scientific community reacted by saying, we should burn this book. So much for science, eh? Science with an exclamation mark, and I fucking love science Facebook group type people. The thing is, he did experiments that essentially proved that once living organisms learn something, it somehow disperses through the earth, and it makes it easier for other people to do it. It's the same thing with the 4-minute mile. Nobody could run a 4-minute mile, and then one guy did it, and about a week later 10 other guys did it. They find this in science, that once some difficult thing that has been difficult to crystallize or manipulate or whatever gets done in one lab, spontaneously happens in all the other labs without any information passing. So it's about 1%. Now, the problem is that there are about, I think it's almost 2 billion. It was 1.2 billion, but I think it's about 2 billion nominal Catholics. So, 1% of those guys is still a big number. And it's not enough being a trad Cath, because guess what? You're still wrong. You're still not Catholic. You really need to be a proper sedeprivationist or sedevacantist, whichever way you want to call it. But again, what are we talking about? Like, say Italy has got 60 million people. What if 6 million of those nominal Catholic, and again, in Italy nowadays, there used to be, 50, 60 years ago, almost everybody was nominally Catholic. Now, there's a lot of people that say, oh, I'm agnostic or I'm atheist. So what are the actual nominal Catholics in Italy? Maybe 40%, maybe 40 million, let's say. I don't know. I've never looked into it. So how many people would you need to get of those 40 million to suddenly cause a shift? And again, I think it's fractal. So would you need, 10%? Would you need 4 million people to be full-on sedevacantists? I don't think so. If you get the 1%, if you get 400,000, I think that's a lot. And guess what? If all those 400,000 congregate outside the Vatican and say, you know what? We're going to go in there and we're going to kick all these guys out. Who's going to stop them? The army? The police? Some of those 400,000 are going to be soldiers. Some of those 400,000 are going to be police. Some of those 400,000 are going to be military police. Do you know what I mean? I believe that 10,000 men, just 10,000 men that marched on Rome, as they used to in the old days with armies, just marched on Rome with pitchforks and torches and said, we're going to burn that fucker out of there. Guess what? We'd have a new pope tomorrow. You got to push back. See, the problem is not how many people. The problem is how many pairs of functioning testicles have you got in a group. Now, the very interesting thing is that my mini community of zealots, it's very impressive because there are people from all different walks of life, all different philosophies. You know, they're not all crazy aggressive fucks like myself. Some of them are really nice people, really, but to a man, they will not take a step back. Some very politely, some like me less politely, but they will just, no, this is the truth and that's that. How many people like that you need before you can make a little truly powerful community of people? Not many. Because most people are followers, most people are sheep. So if you've got like 100 guys like that in a relatively small village, you now have a very strong presence, very strong. You know, if you've got a village of 3,000-4,000 people and you've got 40 people like that, that's 1%. And remember, it's fractal. So those guys are going to influence everybody else because each one of those 40 guys has got a family, each one of those 40 guys has got friends, each one of those 40 guys. And remember, how did religion spread most? How did Catholicism spread most? Family and friends. One of you becomes a zealot, and then slowly the people that love him, the people that care, the people that listen, they also become zealots. And it works. It absolutely is a process that works. So I hope that's answered your question, William. Leroy Chapman says, excuse me, but could somebody tell me under which pope sedevacantism was declared or who made it or said it clearly? Okay, Leroy, I think you coming in on this a bit late. I suggest you watch my video number 1 and number 2. They're slightly out of order, but my videos are all numbered. So number 1 and 2, I think they appear around video 7 or 8. I'm not sure. But look at video number 1 and 2. Sedevacantism is simply a situation where you don't have a valid pope in the chair. You have no pope in the chair. I'm a sedeprivationist. I use the more correct term because there is an imposter in the chair. The chair is not empty. If the chair was empty, that would be easy. Unfortunately, the chair is filled by a liar, a fake. So sedeprivationist. It's sedevacantist means empty chair. Sedeprivationist means the chair is privated from being filled by a valid pope. And that's the situation we have. You know, we've had over 40 anti-popes before 1958. So this is not something that hasn't happened before. It has happened before. It's just the longest continuous period that we've had no valid pope in the history of the church. Because, you know, history resonates. It doesn't repeat, but it resonates. But there were a period of 70 years where you had more than one pope and nobody could really tell which one was the valid pope and so on. So it's not completely brand new. There's been analogous situations in the church. So, and Wooly Ram says that my book Reclaiming the Catholic Church is also a very good jumping board for investigating Catholicism. Yes, it is. You don't need to be Catholic to read that. It explains, you know, it assumes that you don't know very much at all because, you know, I was pretty ignorant about Catholicism, and what I thought I knew was all the same lies that everybody that thinks they're Catholic believes. You know, it was mostly all just lies. So even Salazar banned Freemasonry from Portugal. Well, Freemasonry is Satanism. Now, there's a bunch of Americans in the chat, I'm sure, or listening, that are going, no, but my uncle's a Freemason, and they just build children's hospitals. Now, you have to understand how Satanism works. Satan is the prince of lies. Do you think that they tell you all the truth? Now, I'm sure that at the early rungs of Freemasonry, there are probably some half-decent human beings. Although I have reservations because I know I met some Freemasons, and I know the type of person who wants to become a Freemason is the type of person that thinks that being part of a secret society is cool or dangerous, or, oh, I'm in the in, I'm in the know. So first of all, right there, you've got a problem with Gnosticism and being a liar because you're hiding. I was offered to join the Freemasons. I was offered to join Rosicrucianism, which is another form of it. And they swear you to secrecy. That's, one of the things is if you join, you have to be sworn to secrecy. And I always rejected it because, like, why? What should I hide? What is it that I need to not tell the world? Fuck you and your philosophy and the horse you rode in on. Because even when I was completely not a Catholic at all, I was, for most of my life, I would have defined myself as a Zen agnostic, essentially, which made some people laugh, but it's true. And I was like, nah, why do I need to be part of a secret society? What are you hiding? What do I need to hide? I don't need to hide shit from nobody. And I don't care if you're going to try and kill me for my belief system. That doesn't mean I'm going to be part of it. Sure. If whatever, I don't know, we're in a situation now where it might happen that, like, where are your papers? Of course I'll hide, lie, cheat, steal, whatever, to win. Of course I'll fight. But, back then, in the mid-90s or, late 90s or so on, people tell you, oh, early 90s even, say, oh, you got to join this. Why? There is no belief in any of the countries I lived in that you'd be put to death for, or tortured, or jailed. It was like, even in South Africa, I could say, whatever. I could say, like, no, I'm all for black people, and apartheid is evil and bad. No, I'll put you in jail for that. There was no. I could say whatever I wanted. I always said whatever I wanted. I'm always going to continue to say whatever I wanted. Again, those exceptions that, like, if the Nazis come back and they happen to say, oh, but are you a Catholic? Are you hiding Catholics under your floorboards? I'd be like, nah, not a Jew. Whatever. I'm just, obviously, but, I hope that explains things. So, Leroy, I suggest you do a bit more reading. You're clearly well-intentioned, but you don't know the history, and I've spoken about this quite a bit. So there are, like I said, go and watch video number 1 and 2, and you sort of understand a little bit more. They're only short videos, like 10 minutes each. Daniel says, as of right now, your book seems like a good, quick route to the truth. Well, thank you, but exactly, that is exactly the intention of why I wrote it. That's why I write books, by the way. That's why I wrote The Face of Mars. That's why I wrote the book on Systema, because there's a lot of mythology, lies, bullshit around these kind of topics, and especially on this one. And it's important, so, that's why I did it, essentially. David Perkins says, oh, your dire debate ended up being exclusively about whether the Curia had defected or not, which it looks like you've covered today. Yes, and, the dire debate was an internet bum fight because that guy cannot debate to save his life. And people say, oh, it's a great debate. No, he's not. He's not. He cannot debate shit. He's pathetic at it. And that's why I said before the debate that I was going to do a write-up afterwards, and the write-up continues to exist on my blog. I believe that since then, both the debate and even his earlier video, that was the reason that I called him a liar and a fraud, have since been taken down. So I don't have copies of those videos because I didn't do the recording of the debate. It was done on the kill stream by the Ralph Retort. And it was a bum fight. It didn't stick to the rules, whatever. It was just him shouting, oh, you don't know who Denzinger was. And it's like, no, you're retarded. Of course I know who Denzinger is as a person. And he was like, oh, we're talking about the book. Well, Denzinger is the guy who wrote the book called Denzinger, that you call Denzinger. It doesn't matter what Denzinger said. It's not canon law. Now, Denzinger wrote a bunch of, and Ott, Ludwig Ott, they wrote books that were like, oh, these are the dogma of the Catholic Church. Great. And you can see, if you still had the video, somebody has the video, let me know. You can see there's a point where he's just going on about, no, you don't know this. And I just kept repeating the same thing. How do you implement Catholic dogma? How do you implement Catholic dogma? And he was just like babbling. And I just kept repeating the same question. How do you implement Catholic dogma? How do you implement Catholic dogma? How do you implement Catholic dogma? And eventually it was like, oh, canon law. And then it's like a deer in headlights. For about a split second, you see he just realizes he's just completely fucked himself. Because that's right. That's how you interpret canon law. That's how you apply canon, that's how you apply Catholic dogma. Canon law. Guess what I'm using? Canon law. It doesn't matter what Denzinger said in his 15 volumes or whatever, 2 volumes or whatever. It's actually 2, I think. But it doesn't matter what's in there. You can use that as research. You can use that as foundation. Guess what matters? Canon law. Okay? It's like saying, well, what matters when you take a driving test? The guy in the car with you and the rules of the road that he decides to choose, And now canon law is actually written down, and again, the rules of the road are also written down. That's what matters. The history of the bicycle and how then eventually it led to the car doesn't matter. What Henry Ford thought about the 4 wheels on a vehicle doesn't matter. Irrelevant. Now you can say, oh, but that's how brakes work, and that's why they've got this law that you need to only go at this speed. Great. Guess what? You break the speed limit, that's what matters. How you got there, why you got there, what the origin of it, irrelevant. All completely irrelevant. And that was the point. Then he started to hang his hat on like, oh, but the church has defected. No, it hasn't. And he tried to go on with like, oh, but it has to be in Rome. No, it doesn't. And you know very well that the whole church was in Avignon. Now, in his original video, he carried on and on about that. When he was with me, he was like, oh, skirted that, Jay Dyer cannot argue to save his fucking life. He's a little spurgatron, and he just reads all these books, and he doesn't understand them. And he thinks he does. And because he read all these books, and he says, oh, no, and he uses slightly big words for his average viewer, then people think, oh, he's a great debater. No, he's not. He's not a great debater. He's not even a debater. He's just an idiot. Literally, I think, people say, oh, he's got a high IQ. Like people say, oh, Peterson has got a high IQ. Now, technically speaking, they might have a high IQ, but the problem is their level of efficiency is absolutely shockingly bad. Hence why Jordan Peterson, took meth and had to go to Russia in a coma, and why Jay Dyer is a complete moron who really only retarded autists follow that guy because he can't argue to save his life. And Daniel says, Morphic Resonance, good old Rupert Sheldrake. Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake is a pretty awesome biologist. He wrote another book more recently called The Science Delusion, which is also very good. And Woolly Ram says, reading fantasy novels and D&D manuals makes following paragraph-long sentences a habit. There you go. And Gendertal says, I fucking love science. People are insufferable. Yes, they are, because it's a fake religion. It's got nothing to do with science, nothing to do with dialectic. It's all rhetoric. It's all rhetoric. It's all posing. It's got nothing to do with reality. Nothing. LS16 says, being a trad cat still means you're eating the dirty potato. You're just complaining about it more. There you go. Daniel Pereira says, my cousin in Sicily recently got married in a civil ceremony. It is declining, sadly. Look, Italy is one of the, to a certain extent, least Catholic countries. There is a cultural Catholic sort of undercurrent, but truly Catholic sedevacantists, I mean, it still has one of the largest bases of sedevacantists, and there is one in almost every city in Italy. You can go within driving distance of a Sede church pretty much anywhere in Italy, I think. So, we're probably the largest sedevacantist country in the world. There was posters all over Rome about the fake Bergoglio, saying he's not really the Pope. And there was some prosecutions, I think, because people just affixed these posters everywhere. And Bergoglio, of course, lost his shit. So, yeah. David says, I'd like to switch the burning potatoes with AKs and see what happens. And Daniel says the last march on Rome ended badly. It wouldn't end badly in Italy. The police are, they're tough here, the cops, but they're still human, and they're not going to fire on, let's say, honestly, 10,000 full-on zealots decided we're marching on Rome, we're going to go into the Vatican, and we're going to dethrone that fucker. What would Italy have to do? They'd have to deploy the army, and they'd have to learn to shoot people. They'd have to kill. If we're talking about 10,000 zealots, they'd have to literally murder 10,000 guys who are walking into the Vatican, who are trying to force their way into the Vatican. But I said force their way, I don't mean, shooting at you. Just like, nah, we're just going to keep walking. And if you're shooting us and killing us, then you're shooting us. You're killing us. What would that look like on the world stage? Not good. And what if they do let them in? Well, then the Swiss guards are going to have to do it. How's that going to look? Not good. How are you going to dismiss 10,000 men willing to die live on camera globally? You won't. There'll be videos all over the place. There'll be videos on even those platforms. They'll try and throw it off. They'll exist. They'll be there. People will see it. And you physically march into the Vatican and you throw that fucking imposter into the street. And you clean out every crevice of the Vatican of those pedophile scum that are in there. Then you'd have a reaction. And yes, most nominal churches will be like, oh, the Vatican collapsed. And then it'll be like, no, it's not collapsed. We're actually Catholic. We're willing to die like martyrs here. What are you willing to do with your churchianity other than scream behind the screen? I'm telling you that the enemy is a coward. And this has been my experience in life in everything, from physical confrontations, legal confrontations, moral confrontations. When you actually stand up and say, no, fuck you, and you actually mean it, very, very, very few people push back. It's just not worth it, for them. Daniel says, Morphic Resonance might explain why I became extremely lazy after I recently moved to the ghetto. Well, get out of there. And Freemasons are very similar to cops. Bullies who like cool kids club. Yep. Do you have any opinions about the Knights of Columbus? Yes, they're fake Catholics. They were started as oppositions to the Masons. Yeah, but they all follow Bergoglio, and therefore they're fake Catholics. Wooly Ram says, this might be only tangential. Have you found an effective way of responding to the protty oddness of spiritualizing the church's corporeal reality and tradition? What? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Protestants are retards, and it's quite easy to make them look like retards. They don't read the Bible. They don't know the Bible. They don't understand church history. They have no basis for logic. They literally will argue against logic. Keep in mind that Martin Luther said that logic was like a whore and had no place in Christianity. Keep in mind also that Luther not only banged nuns, but he hung himself. Tells you something. And they try to say, well, I'm not Lutheran. I don't even follow Luther. Really? That's the guy who started it. It doesn't matter whether you understand that you follow what he says or not. That's what you're doing. Yeah? Same like it doesn't matter if you know that Pythagoras was the guy who, invented the Pythagorean theorem. Doesn't matter if you know who Pythagoras was. You're still using it. That's what you're doing. Yeah? When you tell them that, they're like, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Yeah, really? Yeah, that's because you can't fucking do Pythagoras' theorem either, because, 2 and 2 being 4 is complex shit for Protestants. Daniel says that fire on the crowd if it were full of Sicilians and Calabrians. Well, I don't know about the Sicilians, but if it was only full of Calabrians, then they should rightfully fire on the crowd, whether they're marching or not, really. How many years of Inquisition would be needed to clean out Rome? Ah, you see, you're giving me a very open-ended thing there. Now, if you give me some parameters, as in, am I the head inquisitor? And how many, men do I have to command? And how zealous are they? Now, if we make the presumption that I am the head inquisitor, and I've got 10,000 full-on, fully zealous inquisitors at my command, how long would it take to clean out Rome? At the most, in reality, 6 months. I'd give myself a year anyway, but to be fair, after about 1 month, every single fake cleric would have run from that city. Because if I was the Grand Inquisitor, first of all, I would lock the Vatican so none of them can get out. Then I'd go in and put every single one of them at the stake and burn them in St. Peter's Square. That would be day one. Guess what? After that, all the ones that are remaining or that weren't in there to begin with, they would probably move quickly. So in reality, it would probably take about a week. But, I'm assuming carte blanche and 10,000 guys that are willing to do the deed. Oh, reason was a whore of Babylon. It was a... let me see if I can find it. It's... I'll read it. It's a very quotable statement. Let's see. No. Oh, somebody asked me if fake Archbishop Vigano is reading the Kurgan because of his latest comment, which is also quite quotable. Just remind me and I'll read it later. But yeah, here is a quote from, these are the words of Martin Luther himself. Reason is directly opposed to faith, and one ought to let it be. In believers it should be killed and buried. She is the whore of the devil. It can only blaspheme and dishonor everything God has said or done. It is impossible to reform the church if scholastic theology and philosophy are not torn out by the roots with canon law. So you need to get rid of canon law, philosophy, logic, and reason. Logic is nowhere necessary in theology because Christ does not need human inventions. The Sorbonne, the mother of all errors, has defined as badly as could be that if a thing is true, it is true for philosophy and theology. It is godless in it to have condemned those who hold the contrary. So there you go. That's Luther for you. That's Protestantism. And the argument that we had on Social Galactic essentially proved that Protestants will argue against reason, trying to use reason to argue against reason. Bit dodgy, eh? I would say you're not even building on sand. I'd say you're building on imaginary air. Oh yeah, didn't you know that Luther hung himself from his bedpost? Yeah. Woolly Ram says, I worded it badly. Prots spiritualize away the hierarchy, the councils, the closing of the canon. Oh yeah, but of course. Because, what was Luther? Keep in mind, Luther was just a charismatic going, bad church, bad church. Speak in tongues. Here's a snake. Same shit that the American evangelists are doing now. Hallelujah. I cure you from the devil. There you go. It's pathetic. You have to be mentally retarded to be a Protestant or have been brainwashed into it from a young age. That's it. No sane human being looks at Christianity, the history of Christianity, and goes, gonna become a Baptist. Yep, gonna become an Anglican. Church of England, that's for me. No sane human being does that. You have to be brainwashed into it. Or you have to be a complete fucking retard. There's a lot of them, Keep in mind, most people are idiots, so that's what happens, It's just how it is. And Chad says, I think a surprising number of Catholics would look the other way at storming of the Vatican. Yes, those are the sheep that will follow. But first we need that 1% of men. Men lead sheep. You need that 1%. Daniel says there's 22 zealots in the chat right now. Well, I think there's 13 that gave a thumbs up. There's 22 people in here, but you know, only 13 zealots. I think this is Inquisition posting. And Woolly Ram says heresy grows from idleness. True. Gabriel says, I don't think that look the other way, Chad. I think that watch and think it's about time. Yes, there's a bunch of those too. But again, they're not on the front lines. Michael Pecker says, Kurgan, how would nominally Catholics respond to the Inquisition? Would they remain loyal to the Orcos? They would try and avoid it. They would try and just... keep in mind, nominal Catholics are churchans. They're not Catholics. They're not religious at all. They're convenient, you know, ass in butter sitters. They're churchans. So they would just try, oh, is the Inquisition going on? Oh, okay, shit, are they going to come burn my house down? Oh, no, I'm with you guys. I agree. Yeah, burn the heretics. Oh, yeah, I cross myself all the time. I come to Mass. Latin Mass, yeah, that's for me. I like that one. Yeah. That's it. That's most human beings. There was a book I read a while ago called Messages from Michael, which a lot of people would consider heretic. They used some kind of Ouija board to contact these spirits, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, but one of the statistics in there was it discussed different types of soul. Supposedly they got in contact with the Archangel Michael. Who knows? That's why it's called Messages from Michael. It was an interesting book anyway. And some of the things that it discussed, you know, applied. My approach to life is like, does the model work? If the model gives you good results that are for good, then, you know, until you find a better model, go for it. Now, one of the things they mentioned is that they said there were 7 different types of souls, 3 pairs of 2 with 1 on its own, the scholar. And there was, you know, king was the exalted warrior, priest was the exalted serf, I think, and artisan exalted became, I can't remember, some conman type, whatever. Anyway, but 80% of people on the planet are considered to be serfs. And that's true. 80% of people are villagers, you know. The other 20% is a mix of, there's a few kings, very few. There's quite a bunch of warriors and priests, and they can cause trouble. There's some artists, and there's some bullshitters. And then there's a couple of scholars, you know. If you think about it, 8% of people are villagers. And there's that 20%, they cause all the problems. They cause also sometimes the solutions, but, you know, it's just how it is. Wally Ram says, zeal in service of God is its justification. David Perkins says, the Luther quote sounds like a Richard Dawkins wet dream. Well, it kind of is. And if you think about it, what Richard Dawkins has been railing against all his life is essentially the false churchanity of things. And, you know, recently he's Richard Dawkins, Dick Dawkins, as I prefer to call him Dick, you know, the abbreviation of his name is Dick. Dick Dawkins has had some award removed from him from Humanist of the Year or whatever from '96 because he's recently said that, well, transgenderism is bullshit, and, you know, if you're a man, you're a man. It doesn't matter if you chop your dick off, you're still going to be a man. And they said that this, of course, was hate speech or whatever, so it goes against the humanist ideals. So they took back their award. And Wooly Ram says, hold up, isn't the position that we can't use human reason to reach God anathemized? Well, it should be. It's in the Bible. Paul discusses it, you know, and Acts and plenty of other places. Joe C. I hope that means that you're just a forgetful zealot. 18 thumbs up out of 23. So there's a few more zealots in there that just couldn't find the thumbs up button, but that's good. Gavril says, instant thumbs up for that one. And Daniel says, hey, chat, stick your thumbs up in the air instead of the bump. David says, isn't Vox an evangelical? I know Vox can be wrong, but have you ever discussed religion 150 IQ to 150 IQ? I would love to get an umbrella drink because apparently he likes umbrella drinks. I like margaritas, which also usually have an umbrella drink. And now that we're a bit closer, we would have to go off into the tallest tower in the castle, away from the kids and the wives, where it's just the two of us having a drink, discussing our religious beliefs. I have had a very brief interaction with him one of the times I was at his place, where I told him that I'd been, baptized. He said, "Oh, great!" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got baptized as Catholic." And he goes, "Oh, really? Okay, well, still good." And they're like, "No, no, no, no. There's a number, all you Catholics. Let me explain to you a little bit about these Catholics." And I told him, like, who these guys were and how they reacted to certain things. And he was like, "Oh, I could get on board with those Catholics." And then we had a very brief conversation about his view of the Trinity, because I know that's been a contentious issue for a lot of people. And he explained it to me, and I don't want to put words in his mouth. We whatever. It's the way he explained it to me. I couldn't really find fault with his reasoning, nor did I think it was blasphemous. Personally, I think, with respect to the Trinity, I'm easily accepting what the Catholic Church says about it, and I'm fine with it. And you know what? It doesn't change one bit of how you behave in your life, whether you agree with the Catholic position of the Trinity or you have a slight variation of it. Supposedly the difference between the Orthodox and the Catholic is about the filioque, which brings into this, does the Holy Spirit proceeds just from the Son or the Father and the Son, or only the Father, and blah, blah, blah. Again, if you read the Bible, it tells you. It's really quite simple. So, and it also tells you these three are one. The people that say the Trinity is not in the Bible, these three are one. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, these three are one. It's pretty clear. Again, you just gotta read the Bible. You actually gotta read that book. It's not that difficult. It's a book. Just go ahead and read it. Not cover to cover. You can just, and also just read the New Testament. Now, like Professor Rachel Fulton Brown says, if you just read the New Testament without having all the understanding of the Old Testament, you don't really know what you're reading. I kind of agree with that, but at the same time, just start with the New Testament. Just read what is actually in there. It's short, it's not that long. You can deal with it, you can handle it. And you'll notice you can't just read it, in 2 hours, because each one of those pages, each one of those paragraphs, each one of those chapters makes you think. So, the conversation I had with Vox about religion was unfortunately very brief, and I'd love to have a conversation with him about it, because, I joke that I think Vox is a secret Catholic deep down. I know he reads Anne Barnhart. Anne Barnhart also reads Vox. If you read both their blogs, you can see this. Anne Barnhart has a bit of a go at Vox, and Vox has been sympathetic to Catholic, at least to Catholics like myself. He's promoted a couple of things that I've mentioned about. He's actually mentioned this book, and he said, "Look, even though we're not Catholic, we wish him well in cleaning up his church." Because it's true, I don't see Protestantism has caused the secularization of Christianity, as far as I'm concerned. So of course, it's a vile thing, but I don't see Protestantism as that big an issue, because if you wake up a small percentage of the slumbering church and fake pretend nominal Catholics, well, you got your army right there. So that's what I'm spending my time doing. And I don't think Vox is an evangelical. I believe he quite recently, a few days, maybe a week or so ago, he actually posted what his position is. And he posted a version of the creed, which I don't remember if it was pre-Nicene or something. It's slightly different. And he even said there, If I'd worded it, I would have changed this, but I didn't word it, and that's the one I believe. So he believes one of the early creeds, I think. And I think nominally I think his denomination is some kind of Baptist, but I don't know. Whatever, number 41,912 or whatever Protestant version. But yeah. So yeah, I have actually emailed him and I said, look, I know that you're not interested in that stuff and whatever, but would it not be like, there's people that have asked us to do a live stream where we discuss, our various positions on Catholicism versus Protestantism or whatever. And he's like, it's not that I'm not interested, it's just I don't have time and I've got better things to do. And he didn't actually say that. He was very polite about it. But and I get it. It's like, and to be honest, I'd rather have that conversation with him in private, frankly, purely because strategically, I don't know how that would play out for him. I don't personally care one way or the other for myself. But he's got a lot of projects going and whatever. So I don't know. I genuinely would be very interested in that conversation with him. If we both had endless time and whatever, it would be great, because he's one of the people who is smart enough and well read enough and has read the Bible certainly a lot more than I have. Then there could be an interesting dialogue there. It would be very interesting to see. Like I said, I genuinely believe that deep down, probably one of the only reasons that Vox is not a Catholic is because he's got an issue with authority. And I think I understand where that comes from, because, I've got a little tad of an issue myself. But because I did martial arts for a very long time, I also learned to submit my personal ego. Doesn't mean my position, doesn't mean my philosophy, doesn't mean what I believe is the truth. I will not submit that to anyone other than God. But and by God I mean the whole Trinity. But I am capable of completely submitting my ego in certain situations. The church is one of those situations. I have got no problem submitting to the church. I have submitted to a request, a polite request that was made by a priest. And for the first and probably only time in my life, I changed something that I had on my blog. Didn't hide anything, I just made it more polite, let's say. And I took out certain events that I had expressed publicly, because, by the way, the events had happened publicly, so I wasn't disclosing anything that wasn't known, but it wasn't widely known. And the priest gave me a very good reason why I should avoid doing that, and I listened, and I went as far with it as I felt was just to go with it. So yeah, I'll submit to proper authority when it's correct to do so. I think Vox finds that probably a lot more difficult than I do. Wooly Ram says, the real work would start after cleaning Rome. The loyal priests would be doing triple overtime trying to rekindle faith in the laity. I don't think that would take long at all. Tom says that the bullets will bounce off the Calabriani's hard heads. This is true, but this is why we have to use fire. Daniel says, Vox versus the Kurgan over wine on the Amalfi Coast. It would be like Saruman and Gandalf battling on top of the tower. Except Gandalf was played by a gay man. Novus Orco. No. Vox is an Italophile. He's admiring us from afar. David says, hang on. Isn't there a notoriously illiterate consumer of paint thinner who has a hot take on the shape of the earth and the Trinity? You mean some bearded guy with some hygiene issues? Named himself after large, hairy homosexuals? I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate, which might be terrible if you can hear it through. I'm going to take these off for a second. And I fully agree with Wooly Ram, who says having a deep conversation with a friend over a good drink is one of life's true pleasures. It is. It absolutely is. And I've done it quite a lot, but I certainly could do more of it. Gritty Urban Saga says, if the escaping Martians came here and became gods, do you think their original teachings made it to the Bible and changed? Okay, that sounds like a bit of a dig, but it's not. I'll take you up at your word for it. And you might well have read The Face on Mars, given your question. No, I do not think that original teachings would have made it to the Bible and changed. I do believe there are parts of the Bible that are influenced by those events, namely all those parts in the Old Testament that are directly related to histories or stories such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has got parts of it that are recounted in the Bible and modified a little bit. And so, yeah, the ancient astronaut theory, I think, still has merit, but I think that the Jesus event happened much longer after that and is not related to those things. Pew and Bear says, yo, Zealots, good evening. Wooly Ram says that the Dark Lord is understandably shy and private. It's not true. He likes hugs, big hugs. Remember, if you ever meet Vox, give him a big hug. Loves that. Gandalf the Gay. Yeah. Daniel said Gandalf the Gay, and Wooly Ram says, take that back, Daniel. Well, I'm afraid in the film, he was played by a gay man. Not a dig at all. Yeah, no, I didn't assume it was. It's just at first I was like, oh, he's one of these guys making fun of the Martians. But no, I get it. You were being serious with your question, and I hope I've answered it. I think the ancient astronaut stuff happened a lot earlier than pretty much anything, including the Old Testament stuff. Because the Old Testament stuff, yes, it starts with Genesis and the creation of Earth and so on. So there are elements of the Old Testament that supposedly go right to the beginning of time, and they may well do. But for the most part, most of the stuff that was written in the Old Testament covers about 400 years, roughly speaking. There are much older writings. For example, some Sanskrit writings cover periods supposedly that happened 30,000 years ago, and they're a lot more relevant to like the ancient astronaut theory and so on. And Josie says, ha, I can imagine the look on Vox's face while getting a hug from a stranger. I'd pay money if someone got that on film. I think I may have hugged him on purpose just to get that look, but I think it was my wife that saw it because I was giving him a proper hug, so my face was next to his side onto his, so I didn't actually see his expression, but I imagine a little bit like deer in headlights, possibly. He didn't pat me back on the shoulder. I was quite hurt by that. Possibly even had a tear rolling down one eye. Yeah, sad. Yeah, I think if a total stranger went up to Vox and hugged him in the street, it could well be that you wake up a little bit later. Yeah. Anyway, I've been going for an hour and a half, and it is 10:15. So I think that'll do for tonight. Thank you all for sticking through a pretty dry live stream, I suppose, for most of you. But I hope you enjoyed it, or I hope it answered some questions, and at least it's another one in there for that explains the indefectibility of the church. And Dave, Gritty Urban Saga says, David, I think there are some of the earlier stories have to do with visitation. Some of the newer parts are possibly more tainted by translating or other things. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair description. Like the story of Lot, I am still, also you've got to keep in mind that the El, from which Elohim and all that, quite possibly, I think there are passages in the Old Testament where that God is potentially not the God, but a celestial sort of type ruler. And Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by asteroid impacts, which, if you've read The Face on Mars, you understand that's a proper weapon, and that's what I believe happened on Mars. And if that is what happened on Mars, and if the survivors were from that war, they would not use those weapons. And they may well have had genetic engineering going on and all sorts of stuff happening with the proto-monkeys that were on Earth, that were perhaps far less evolved, or at least a little bit less evolved than the people who came here from those places. If I had to guess at a timeline of when that stuff happened, I would say probably about 30, 40,000 years ago, because that's when Homo sapiens sort of appeared on the scene. That is also when potentially Mars had certain astronomical things that would fit the parameters. And there's a huge change of in the fossil record from about 30,000 years ago. So I think that would be my best guess. And thank you, Gritty Urban Saga, for the question. I do appreciate those questions. It's just took me a second to realize you weren't some random gamma, like just trying to throw dirt. But no, thanks for the question. I enjoy those. And Genesis was written by Moses. It's a very condensed summary of theology and tribal genealogy. Yeah, exactly. So, And good night. Yeah, thank you. Good night to yourself as well, Wooly Ram. Pew and Bear says, I had a conversation with Polish mother about V2 being heretical, V2 mass invalid, JP2 imposter. I am officially crazy of the family, and my bro is flat-earthed. Oh, good God. My condolences. I'll say a prayer for you. To be fair, many years ago, long before the flat earth became a thing, my brother sent me a picture of a flat earth thing saying, hey, what do you think of this? So the flat earth, one of the plane trips. And I'm like, I actually called him up. I was like, dude, the fuck? Are you drunk or something? And he was like, no, man, I was just fucking with you. I was like, okay. Because, you have to be mentally retarded to believe the flat earth stuff. But again, look at people getting vaccinated and wearing masks everywhere. It's just, most people are idiots. It is a sad, undeniable fact. Just look around you. It's full of idiots. So that's that. If you guys haven't done so, do try and join in on the Telegram thing. I'm not very prolific on Telegram, but I just give you little extra bits. There's like, if you ask questions on there, I can reply because it's not a huge group or anything. But there you go. LS16 says, thank you for streaming. God bless and good night to you and the immortals. Good night, you guys. Pure and Beer. How is flat earth less crazy? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, good night all. Thank you all very much. And David Perkins goes, everyone knows the damn thing is hollow. Now that I like. I love that one. Of course it's not, but you know why? Comic books. Warlord. Remember the Warlord comic books where he goes into the hollow earth and there's like werewolves and there's like magic and unicorns and it's cool. It's basically like a D&D kind of place. Yeah. So unfortunately though, or fortunately, I have met Ranulph Fiennes, who has hiked across Antarctica and no hollow earth. So sad. So very sad. Very, very sad. But thank you all, and Good night. Yes, I know the Polish fake Pope is one of the pillars of Polish identity. So sad. Good night, all. Thank you very much. I would like to stay and chat with you guys a lot more, but you're gonna have to like come to the Kurganet, be a good zealot, and then we can have drinks face to face. You know. Good night, all.